for coming. Those who arrived a little earlier, I guess you're fortunate because I understand now it's really pouring out there. So let's hope it's all over when we end our session. But we're not going to allow this to rain on our parade today because we're doing something we consider extremely important, and we think that it's going to affect and impact on many people's lives and also our children and how they're taught in our schools. I'm Franklin Schaefer, and I'm the CEO of CGFNS International. So I've had the great privilege of watching this come and grow and work with some people in the room, so especially our attorney. Gary, would you mind? Gary Bragg is our attorney for CGFNS Board of Trustees. And some of the others in the room that you'll hear as we go along, because I know Mukul and Polly will be certainly introducing others. So on behalf of CGFNS International, Inc., I would like to welcome everyone here this night as we celebrate something new and wonderful for us. It's going to be the launch of the Teachers Code for Ethical and International Recruitment Employment Practices. We had the great opportunity to have the Alliance join us in September of this year, the Alliance for Ethical Recruitment International Healthcare Professionals. It blended very nicely with our mission, and at that time we also began to hear about the situation with the teachers. So we were able to also learn from our experts and see how there are similarities, but some differences, but more similarities between what the healthcare professionals must go through and what the teachers will be going through. Now, like teachers, like nurses and other healthcare professionals, the United States has certain law requirements that everyone must go through if you desire to migrate to the United States and practice here. We're not different than any other countries. Our laws might be a little different, but we're all trying to do the same thing. We're interested in quality and the protection of the individuals who are coming, as well as the people that are going to be receiving their services. But most importantly, we're interested really how the teachers will be treated today and tomorrow, because we see a great deal of similarity what happened to the nurses early on since the shortages started. We at CGFNS started 38 years ago. Our history is grounded in what you're hearing about today. In those 38 years, we've had over 1 million nurses go through our doors for visa screening. And in that role, and why we were established, was the fact that there was a severe nursing shortage. Employers could not get the nurses into the United States because they had to pass the NCLEX exam. And there were other issues. But a number of the foreign educated nurses went through a tremendous hurdles and barriers to become practicing nurses in the United States. So we were started to create a predictive exam. The nurses that had to come here had to take the NCLEX exam, come to the United States and take it. Now, most of the nurses, like teachers, are coming from developing countries. So for them to get the money to come to the United States, that was a big chore. And they really had their family pool their resources to come. A number of them failed the examination. So our government, along with the Kellogg Foundation and 2 other bodies, created 2 research projects. And in that research project, they said, we want to create a predictor exam. That's how CGFNS was started. We became the organization that created the exam and administered it around the world, and that gave them the opportunity to find out how they would do on the NCLEX exam. That continues to be one of our products today, one of our services today, and it is a great predictor how nurses will succeed on their examination. We've expanded over the years. Now we're the only organization certified by the U.S. government to do the visa screening program for nurses who want to come into the United States. We're also the only organization that does all other 7 health professions. So we've had a great opportunity to learn about the experiences that nurses and non-nurses go through. And as we talk with the teachers and the recruiters and the various stakeholders in the teachers arena, we find that the similarities are very, very much present. So while our mission with the Alliance blended very nicely, we see where we're going now with the teachers blending as well. So I've had the great opportunity to stand a little bit back and first learn from Polly about the whole situation and what was going on, and also some of the other experts in the room. So I'm not going to keep talking about who we are and what we do at CGFNS, because we're just very, very honored to be here tonight, to be able to say we as an organization are here as an advocate for the individuals who are migrating to the United States. We indeed want the employer and the individual to be treated fairly. And most importantly, the student who's being educated to get the quality of education so badly needed. So at this point, I'd like to ask a very special person who has made so much of this possible for us. It's been through her vision, her strategic thinking, and I have to also, her coaching that has made this possible for us to be here today. Dr. Patricia Pittman. Polly, please come up. Join me.
So most of all, I just wanted to say how exciting it is to be here today. This has been a long haul. I think we started on this process 3 or 4 years ago. 5? Ouch. And it's had several iterations. We were fortunate to have funding from the MacArthur Foundation to explore the possibility that we could create a code of conduct that was similar to the nurses, but obviously had its differences. I had the privilege of leading that project in its early years, and in a moment I'll introduce the new leader of the project. Frank has asked me just to say a few things about sort of lessons learned from the healthcare side and some of the similarities and differences with the education side. So, you know, obviously there are a lot of similarities in terms of the kinds of problems that people were experiencing during the recruitment process. There were problems in terms of the lack of regulation and enforcement in the sending countries, and similarly in this destination country. There's also, I think, a recognition in both cases that a voluntary code of practice is simply one tool in the toolbox. It's not the magic bullet. It's not the only thing that people should be working for who care about these issues. And I think we were cognizant of that on the healthcare side as well as on the education side from the very beginning. To the extent that this gets the issues out there, it shows that it's possible to create consensus around standards. These kinds of codes can lead to other things. They can lead to international agreements. They can lead to state-based regulations. They're not, in and of themselves, the end-all. They do, however, represent an important step forward, we think. So in that sense, there were a lot of similarities. There are also important differences. So a huge difference, I think, from a strategic point of view, is that many of those who are employing staff in agencies that bring over the international teachers are public sector schools. In healthcare, it's entirely private. So the responsibilities of the public sector with regard to treating their employees in a fair way is obviously, I think, an issue that is somewhat more accessible than dealing with the fragmented and very chaotic healthcare system than we have in this country. So I think, to some extent, that has been an advantage. And I think the presence of Baltimore City Schools here today is a testament to the receptivity of the public sector to these issues and their intent to do better in the future. Obviously, the visas are different, and that creates a whole area of gaming of the process that is its own story. The other thing that was really different is the process of developing the standards, and in part it had to do with the two distinct groups of stakeholders that were involved at the very beginning. But I would say that it's fair to say on the healthcare side, there's always a trade-off between the level of standards and the number of stakeholders that you have that agree to those standards. And on the healthcare side, we made a huge effort to ensure that all of the stakeholders possible would stay at the table. And therefore, the standards are less rigorous than those that were achieved in the education side. I think there was a decision among the leadership not of me, but of the stakeholders, that they were willing to go forward with more rigorous standards than we were able to achieve on the healthcare side, but of course with a smaller group of leaders as a result. And I think there's kind of an interesting social experiment that's been set up here with the two codes, and there's mutual learning. I think on the healthcare side, there's a lot of interest in tightening up that code so that it is a stronger set of standards, and particularly in the area, for example, of fees and the issue of staffing agencies. These are issues that were left out of the healthcare side. So while the healthcare side started first, I think the education side is really taking the lead in many of these issues, and those of us who came from health policy are really interested to see how all of this plays out. I think there are important challenges here. This is not going to be easy road forward. This is just one milestone. Coming to the National Press Club and announcing consensus among a subset of the stakeholders around these standards is really exciting. But there's a long haul ahead. And obviously that has to do with dissemination of the code and uptake of the code. And I think that there are two parts of that. One is sort of the art of advocacy and diplomacy, which takes a lot of political acumen and a lot of energy, and we've got to really keep that up over many years, and we'll have to see how we do on that. We've got to keep focused. And the other, of course, is the financial sustainability, and that's where I think CGF&S can play an important role. Obviously, an initiative like this cannot be entirely fee-based, but nor can it be entirely dependent on the goodwill of foundations. We were fortunate to have the MacArthur Foundation early on. They've now changed their priorities. We need to think about other ways to sustain this work. And CGF&S has a series of services that they can provide to employers and to migrants that might be able to sort of identify the way forward in terms of how to sustain something like this. It's really important, I think, that although these two initiatives fall under the Alliance umbrella, and although we are thinking constantly about the similarities and the lessons learned, that they do remain distinct because the communities are distinct, and because the specificities of the process, to the degree that we lose sight of those specificities and we stay at the level of rhetoric, the instrument is really not very powerful. So we really do care about the details, the business models, and for that we need to continue to do research, we need to continue to study it because it changes. It's very dynamic, and so we need groups of people who are focused on specific industries. We also need those different industries to be talking to each other, and in that sense the Alliance appears to be sort of setting a culture of distinctness and yet sharing lessons learned that could be very exciting, I think, and possibly expand to other sectors as well, because we know, of course, that this issue of recruitment of workers to the United States is not just in the healthcare and the education sector. So with that, I'd like to introduce the new, or not so new, director of the Alliance for Ethical International Recruitment Practices, which is a division of CGF&S, Mukul. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you all for taking the time to come here this evening. It's such a pleasure to be here at the National Press Club to launch this new Teachers Code. And I encourage you to look at this as a start, as Polly referred to, whether it be talking to your colleagues in faculty break rooms or working with unions and other things, or just using the hashtag Teachers Code on social media. It's really about spreading this message and getting it out there about what this code is and what it can do. I think we talked a little bit, and Paulie and Franklin both alluded to the fact that while immigration has always been a fundamental part of the American story, global labor mobility is creating a new set of challenges because legal regulation is historically based on the premise of territorial jurisdiction. Recruitment across borders often involves uncertainty over who has the power to regulate and who's responsible for what happens. Even when the will is there, practical enforcement can be problematic. And in fact, the US government at this point has not enacted the comprehensive reforms to mitigate some of these problems. And that's where the code, I think, has a key step. In the context of the K-12 education sector, districts are often unaware of their legal obligations. That's one of the things we found most, I guess, problematic, is that people don't realize what their roles are and what needs to be done. And it seems particularly wrong that the teachers leading our children's classrooms often do not have the pay, the working conditions, or training and support that they should have. That has made the importance of these efforts of the Alliance and its partners so important to combating trafficking, exploitation, and ensuring that our students' classrooms are led by well-qualified and fairly treated teachers. So what is the code and how does it do that? It really contains key principles regarding transparency, fairness, and adequate training. There are 5 key parts. There's a preamble that discusses some of the issues involved in teacher recruitment. Section A deals with federal, state, and local rules and how schools and districts and other employers must follow them. Section B creates some procedural immigration practices that are fair to all parties involved. Section C is about pre-contract disclosure, and this is really about the premise of transparency, so that expectations between all the stakeholders in a given situation are aligned. Section D refers to contract and employment practices and establishes some best practices, some real good guidelines to help districts and others understand how to treat their teachers. And Section E focuses on cultural and professional orientation. This is really about making sure that everyone has the training that they need to succeed in the classroom, and also that people's colleagues are trained in how to ensure that their foreign educated colleagues are treated fairly as well and have the skills they need to succeed. So what is the code and what does it do, what doesn't it do? I think, if I had to synthesize those 5 kind of major pieces I talked about, the code is really about describing the rights and responsibilities of the districts, the recruiters, and the teachers themselves. It ensures disclosure of those rights and responsibilities to the teachers and to other parties. It upholds the principle of equal treatment between foreign educated or overseas trained teachers and their US-based counterparts. It ensures proper orientation to facilitate the integration of overseas trained teachers. And it signifies a commitment to ethical recruitment by endorsing stakeholders so that they can state that they care about recruitment, whether or not they are or currently are not engaging in that type of recruitment. So what does the code not do? Well, it does not state whether a district should or should not use international recruitment. Both the Alliance and the code itself are immigration neutral. Rather, it's about, if it is happening, making sure it happens fairly. It doesn't dictate the visa type or recruitment method. It doesn't facilitate recruitment of trained teachers directly, nor does it create additional legal obligations for districts or affect teacher or classroom management. So you have the code in your packets, and you can learn a lot more about it. And I'm also happy to answer questions afterwards or by email. But before we move to the panel, I want to say that the success of this effort has depended on many people. Dozens of people helped develop this code, and they're listed in the back of the booklet that you received. And the real key here, though, is the Teachers Code Steering Committee that has really moved this forward. They've worked tirelessly to take the document that was created and bring it here and now beyond into the districts and classrooms across the country. And so I'd like to acknowledge the steering committee and who they are individually, and if those of you who are here want to stand up quickly, that'd be wonderful. From the National Education Association, Daya Bilal Treats. From the AFL-CIO, yeah, let's give them applause, thanks. From the AFL-CIO, Shannon Lederer. From the Filipino Educators in Maryland, and an overseas trained teacher himself, Roji Legaspi. From the American Federation of Teachers, Dan McNeil. And from VIF International Education, Caroline Spencer. So thank you all for your effort. Finally, I'd like to introduce the leader of this steering committee, who has been a huge part of pushing this process forward. She was the author of Migrant Teachers, How American Schools Import Labor, and is a professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she's been a tireless advocate for ensuring that teacher recruitment proceeds fairly. Laura Bartlett. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I study teachers' work and schools as workplaces for teachers. I've been researching teacher labor migrations, especially movements into the United States throughout the past 10 years, and I'm honored tonight to moderate today's panel. But before we turn to our panelists, I want to briefly share with you some of the findings from my research. So, the phenomena of overseas trained teachers in US schools can be hard to see. This is because these teachers are working on more than one type of visa, and also because most state education reporting systems don't account for them. It's difficult to track the numbers arriving into the United States each year, or to be certain about the overall numbers currently working here, or to know where and what overseas trained teachers are teaching in US public schools. Despite the limited information, by using partial data, we know the numbers are significant. For example, between 2002 and 2008, 92,000 overseas trained teachers were sought by American public schools for labor shortages. Now, 92,000 may not sound like a lot when you consider there are over 3 million public school teachers in this country. But consider this. Teach for America, the well-known program that places recent college graduates into 2-year internships in public schools, Teach for America placed only 24,000 interns in the first 20 years of its program. So when we compare 92,000 overseas trained teachers in 6 years with 24,000 TFA interns over 20 years, we can see that overseas trained teachers are a substantial source of the US teacher labor market. Furthermore, overseas trained teachers are not evenly distributed across the United States. Rather, they are concentrated in high poverty urban and some rural school districts. And within those school districts, overseas trained teachers are most likely to be found in math, science, and special education departments. I have visited schools where half of the math and science departments teachers are overseas trained teachers working on short-term visas. And I've been in school districts that have sponsored hundreds of teacher visas in a single year and over 1,000 visas for teachers over just a few years. So what we find are highly concentrated pockets of overseas trained teachers in certain departments of high poverty urban and some rural schools. Now, because of location and limited resources, these schools often have the most difficulty in finding qualified local teachers in specific subject areas. Therefore, urban and rural schools in high poverty areas are the most likely schools to seek teachers from a global labor market. These schools are also likely to seek or accept assistance from teacher placement services that specialize in migrant teachers. Without the guidance of a specific set of basic practices, each school district, placement agency, and migrant teacher has been forced to reinvent for themselves the standards by which they navigate the complex legal and ethical landscape of hiring practices, working conditions, and immigration status. Now, the question I always get about this stage is, are overseas trained teachers effective? Are they making important contributions to the education of public school children in this country? And the answer is, they absolutely can be. And whether or not they are able to be effective, successful teachers is based on the conditions of their recruitment and employment. Overseas trained teachers who are misled about the nature of their work and the conditions of their visa, who are housed in substandard housing, who are forced to separate from their children, who incur huge debt through their migration, and who are subject to exploitive working conditions, these teachers are rarely effective or successful. In contrast, teachers who receive the support they need to transition to teaching in a new country and culture, who know in advance the terms of their visas and the cost of their migration, who are allowed to make their own decisions about when and if their children accompany them, who are treated with respect and work in supportive employment contexts, these teachers can be highly effective and successful. Whether or not we maximize the educational benefit of teacher migrations into US public schools depends on how we recruit and employ overseas trained teachers. Ethical international recruitment and employment of teachers ensures that we treat teachers with the respect they deserve as people and as professionals. It also ensures that we maximize the benefit for the students in schools where they work. Fairly treated and well-supported teachers are more effective teachers. The Teachers Code was written by representatives from every migration stakeholder: employers, recruiters, labor unions, and teachers themselves. These stakeholders are represented on our panel today, and they are here to share with you their perspectives on the Teachers Code and the reasons they and their organizations are compelled to endorse and support the Teachers Code for international recruitment and employment. We'll hear from them in the order they appear in your program, and then we'll take questions after all the panelists have spoken. I was going to introduce them all to each of you, but their bios are in the program, and I've asked each of them to introduce themselves to you. So with no further ado, let us begin to hear from our panelists. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight for a really important event. My name is Mary Catherine Ricker, and I am a middle school English teacher, currently serving as Executive Vice President of the American Federation of Teachers. We represent over 1.6 million public school teachers, PSRPs, higher education faculty, as well as a significant amount of the healthcare sector. The AFT heartily endorses the code for a myriad of reasons, and I really am honored to be able to give you a few of those reasons and highlight them for you. First of all, the code facilitates fair and transparent recruitment of international teachers, and that, as you heard earlier, that will benefit teachers, students, and the whole community. U.S. school districts employ thousands of overseas trained teachers, as you've heard, 92,000 just in a 6-year period. The code will help ensure that our schools' classrooms are led by fairly treated, well-trained, and qualified teachers, and that is beneficial to students, to the entire staff, and to the community. Additionally, the code is necessary to end abusive practices by recruiters and ensure that parties understand their legal obligations, that all parties understand their legal obligations. The code requires transparency and truthful information regarding the recruitment practice. It requires transparency around visa type and employment requirements so that all parties can form those realistic expectations. The code prohibits charging teachers visa or recruitment fees and properly places the cost of recruitment with the school district, thereby eliminating any coercion and allowing teachers to focus on our jobs. The code also ensures that all teachers are subject to the same wages, terms of employment, including a collective bargaining process and due process protections. This is critical because international teachers are being used to fill long-term positions, then they should be treated as long-term employees with the same rights as their US colleagues. If employers are allowed to use the complexities of the immigration process as justification to let an international teacher go, it undermines the collective bargaining agreement and due process protections for all teachers. So there are many reasons that the AFT stands firmly in endorsement of the code. Those are a few, and I'm actually looking forward to interacting with the panel to share some more. Thank you so much.
Good evening. It's been a long time coming. Wanted to thank Frank and Polly and Mukul and Laura, Dan and Shannon. We started, Emily, where are you? We started this work quite a while ago, and we put a lot into it, and it's a really rewarding day to see this finally launch. I would like to thank the international teachers who are here. Your value to our country cannot be understated. International teachers can give us so much, from native speech to being cultural role models to serving the international students in their schools. There are just so many things that international teachers can bring to their communities and to their schools, and I want to thank you all. Roji, thank you a lot. VIF is an organization that started in 1987 with the dedication of global education for all students. What we were seeing is that most universities had already established very significant international education programs. Even today, if you go and look what college and career ready means, you kind of say, okay, every college is international and every job is international. But then if you look at K-12 and you try to figure out, okay, what's happening at K-12, what you see is a few IB schools, International Baccalaureate, and what you see are a few private schools. But when you look at the mass majority of our schools, there's very little happening to prepare our citizens for what is an increasingly global society. VIF has pledged to address this. Only 15% of U.S. citizens will leave North America in their lifetimes. Therefore, to prepare our students for the world that they will inherit, which is likely to be significantly even more global, we've got to do some things in our schools to address that. There are a number of areas where we can do that, and that's what our organization works on. We operate a network of dual language immersion schools to provide intensive language instruction in these schools. We operate globally themed schools in which the curriculum is globalized, the teacher training is global, the experiences that kids are provided are all with a global focus. We have online professional development and digital curriculum that is now allowing us to scale global learning across the entire country, and at a very affordable pace, something that schools can afford to do and are doing. And then finally, for 27 years, we've been operating an exchange visitor program of the U.S. Department of State. This program brings international teachers to schools that are operating many of these programs, so language immersion teachers, elementary teachers that may be from a region of the world that the school is focused on. They're incredible resources, authentic, native speech, and for schools that are pursuing this kind of global education, international teachers are essential. In our case, our success is wholly based on successful teacher experiences. The idea is that these teachers come in, share their world with our students, but that ultimately they go back home and share a very positive U.S. experience for the rest of their careers. So these are temporary exchange teachers. They come from 1 to 3 years and provide these incredible experiences as part of these programs. So the way we bring in international teachers is very, very methodical. We support them wholly from day one to the end of their experience, and then we continue to interact with them for the rest of their careers, because at the end of the day, it's a public diplomacy effort that is meant to increase the awareness of our citizenry, but also provide a very positive view of the United States when they go home abroad. So we've been very pleased to be part of this for a long time. We hope that the model that we have used has served as an exemplar as we look at how we can support teachers. And we believe in the code because it is everything we believe, that teachers should be respected, valued, celebrated, treated fairly and equitably, and ultimately, in our case, providing extraordinary experiences to U.S. students and enjoying an extraordinary experience themselves before they go home. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. But before I introduce myself and tell you the BTU story, I wonder if you would join me for a moment of silence. A moment of silence to remember the young men and women who serve in the armed forces that keep this country safe so that we might be able to meet here. And for the families of those international teachers who've left their homes so far away to come here. So if you could just for a moment, join me in a moment of silence, and whatever it is that centers your life, remember these families. Thank you, and good evening. I am Marietta English, president of the Baltimore Teachers Union. We represent over just about 8,000 teachers and paraprofessionals and school-related personnel. And so you've already heard the reasons why this code is so important. I'm just gonna share with you the BTU story. The BTU story began, as I'm told, 10 years ago. And there was an article in the paper about the recruitment of Filipino teachers. And they were shadowing one teacher particularly for 3 days. So honestly, I didn't know anything about this recruitment of these international teachers, or these teachers from the Philippines. So I went to meet with this teacher that they were following for 3 days to ask her what was it like to come to the United States. And we had a long conversation, and I got to know some of the reasons why they came. And I went to several schools and visited with other Filipino teachers and had conversations with them and found out they enjoyed being here and they wanted to stay. However, I was told by the district it was only a 3-year deal, that they were coming here for 3 years and then they were gonna go back. And they were recruiting more. And every year they were going to the Philippines, recruiting teachers, and then expecting them to go back. Well, it's like anything. Once I get my foot on this ground, I ain't going back. And I then began to find out that the teachers who were applying to stay were being denied. And we had to figure out what was happening with the denial. See, I didn't know anything about a H-1B visa or whatever they were called. I know more about visas now than I ever thought I would ever know. And I remember meeting with Roji and said, what is the path to citizenship? And in my mind is his convoluted, how he drew out the map of how do we go from here to here, get this visa, H-1B, then you got to apply for that, and then you get a green card. Well, it's not that simple. It's much more complicated than that. And then our teachers were being denied, and we didn't know why. So I then went to the district and said, we need to have a lawyer for our international teachers. And we just happened to have, at that time, a CEO who was also an immigrant. And he was very sympathetic. So he then hired a lawyer for our international teachers. I don't know what happened, but that didn't work out either, and we were still getting denied. Over and over and over again. And so I said, we need a liaison to figure out what's causing the denial. So over the summer, the district agreed to hire 2 international teachers to make sure that the files were filed correctly. I don't know what happened, but still we were getting denied. I even hired a lawyer so that our teachers could have somebody to make sure that things were being filed, what their rights were with the district. And I worked with AFT and Dan, and we met, and it was just a long time. The value of what I saw, though, was when I went to see the Filipinos, the international teachers, closing activities. What I saw then was how the children were experiencing another culture and learning so much. Because not only did they include in their closing activity the Filipino teachers, but they included the children that they had taught. And they had learned so much, not only how to dance, how to speak, how to enjoy another culture. And as it was stated earlier, some of us, is it only 15% of us that won't leave the country? Probably a little more. But there, I would say 90% of the children who won't ever leave the city. And so to bring that culture there, to see some other culture is so important and so enriching. That is an education that you won't even, that's not on a standardized test, that's not scored, that's not measured, but it will enrich the lives of those children forever, forever. And they will understand, when they get older, then they might decide they want to go to visit another country. But it was important to me that, one, our teachers knew their rights. How could we help them get on the path to citizenship and not be denied, not be audited, and be able to get that green card that gave them safe passage back home? Because what happens if you get here and you're afraid to go home and I may not be able to get back? Because that actually happened. That actually happened to one teacher. She went home and then she couldn't get back because she hadn't done this, she needed to do that. And so I'm a very compassionate person. You know, people laugh at me because I watch Shirley Temple movies. Well, that's the kind of movies I like. I don't like blood and guts. I'm a very romantic, idealistic person. So I think it's very important that we recruit them fairly, that they have an opportunity to, on the path to citizenship, and that they're not denied and that they're not audited. And if we recruit them the right way, then it won't happen. I can say our CEO was, I believe, the most compassionate person that there could be, because he made sure that those teachers who had paid their way here were reimbursed for paying their way here. Because he did not want them to not have that path to citizenship that he was afforded, even though he came here when he was 12, but he understood that compassion, and he was very compassionate about that. And that was my whole thing. I was going to make sure that our teachers had everything they needed to be able to get to that green card and be able to stay. I can't tell you the number of meetings, the number of times we met, the number of times we had the lawyer in. It was many, many times. And it seemed, when you said it was 10 years, it seemed like it just happened yesterday. I don't know where all the time went. But I am very grateful to AFT for supporting us. I don't know how many times Dan came. I don't know how many times we had Shannon there. But it was important to me that our teachers had every opportunity and were treated fairly and as they began to work in the district. And so it was up to us to do everything that we could to make sure that we had the ethical treatment of our teachers. Thank you.
Erica Lomax was coming to speak on behalf of the Baltimore City Schools, and I believe, yeah, and she's had transportation problems, is what I'm saying. And so we're still hoping that she'll make it before the end of the panel, but we're going to go ahead and hear now from Raji Legaspi, please. Thanks, Raji.
Good evening. So I'm Roger Legaspi. I have been a teacher for 23 years, and I'm so very honored to have been invited to be part of this panel out of the, 92,000 international teachers in the country. I have spent 13 of those years, of those 23 years, as a middle and high school science teacher in American public schools. I am Filipino, and I have twice been recruited by agencies to migrate from the Philippines to fill teacher labor shortages in the United States. First in 1992, when I was recruited to teach in Texas, and then again in 2008, when I was recruited to teach in Baltimore, where I still teach today. I have an undergraduate degree in biology, completed 2 years of medical school. I always joke that I met my wife over a dead body. We met at an anatomy, she's spouting right now, but that's true. And I'm certified to teach both in Texas and in Maryland, and I have a master's degree in educational administration. I love teaching, and I'm very dedicated to the students that I teach and the profession where I'm in. My wife is also from the Philippines, and she too teaches in Baltimore as a public high school science teacher. We both came on H-1B visas to teach in schools that serve predominantly low-income, non-white student populations. If you have seen the Baltimore protests on TV, you have seen a glimpse of our student demographics in Baltimore. My wife and I have 2 children of our own. Both of them were born here in this country, and both attending Baltimore public schools. So I speak today about myself, but I also speak on behalf of the thousands of overseas trained teachers working in American public schools, some of whom are in attendance tonight from Baltimore Teachers Union and from Baltimore City Public Schools. I endorse the Teachers Code because I know through my personal experience that there are good and bad ways to recruit teachers into the United States. I have experienced both ethical and unethical treatments. The differences are very, very important. It is important that this code be widely adopted so that we can protect teachers' rights as employees and, more importantly, as humans, and that we ensure high-quality teaching for students in our schools. My 1992 recruitment in Texas is an example of an unethical and ineffective teacher recruitment practice. I was misled about my visa and employment status, charged large sums of money, and housed in substandard accommodations. The agency that recruited me led me to believe that there was a job waiting for me in Texas, but that was not the truth. Instead, they were my H-1B sponsor. And when I arrived, I was told that I had to go out and look for a teaching position myself. The agency would pile 18 of us into a 7-person van and drive us from school district to school district in response to job postings. And you know for sure that Texas is a whole other country. And, you know, driving from one county to the next was a lot of driving. And 18 of us in one van. They also pressured us to take any job offered to us, even if we were not qualified for the position. I was promised transitional housing, and it turns out that meant sleeping on sofas in unfurnished storage basement with 5 of my fellow migrant Filipino teachers and several macaws that were allowed to freely fly overhead. I had to work very, very hard to protect my only interview blazer from the bird droppings. This is the same blazer I'm wearing tonight from 23 years ago. I purchased a new jacket, but I said, you know what, for effect, I'm going to use this. And I also wanted to prove that my efforts were not in vain. So it's had some holes now in many places. In fact, I was kind of ironing it today, and I said, oh my goodness, there are holes. But that's okay. After 23 years, it's also tight in the midsection. But I was told that after 23 years, fabric tends to shrink. So we were eventually moved into an unfurnished 2-bedroom apartment where between 18 teachers, we slept in the living room. We slept on the floor. And initially, we had no water, no electricity. I arrived with about $150 to my name, but that was more money than any other teacher that arrived with me. The agency charged us placement fees and required us to sign over 10% of our wages to them for the first 2 years. In addition, they were constantly adding unexpected fees, like the fee that they used to charge us for the rides that in that overcrowded van for interviews. My debt to them kept growing. Money was very tight, even after I got a teaching job. In addition to the 10% wage, I was teaching on an emergency teaching certificate and taking classes at the University of Texas to earn a teaching credential. As a non-resident, I had to pay 3 times the in-state rate for tuition. I fell behind in my payments to the recruitment agency, and they sent my debt to a collections agency where fees and interest were added to what I already owed. It was a very difficult time, and I feel fortunate to have been successful in my work and also in my education. Many of my fellow migrant workers were not as fortunate. I taught in Texas public schools for 6 years on an H-1B visa, and then spent another 6 years working in a Texas Catholic school on a religious visa. Before returning to the Philippines, I earned a master's degree in administration and was promoted to principal. I got married and had 2 children during my time in Texas. In 2004, I returned to the Philippines with my family to care for my ailing mother. In 2008, though, my wife and I were both recruited to teach in Baltimore City Public School System on H-1B visas, and we came back with our children. Our experience in Baltimore, on the other hand, was very different from the former experience I had in Texas in 1992. First of all, we interviewed with Baltimore City Public School System employees, and while we were still in the Philippines, we got some sort of an orientation. They gave us work contracts before we left the Philippines. We knew for certain that we were employed as teachers in the district. We were employees, and that certainly is very important. When we arrived, we were housed in a clean apartment with water, electricity, and airbed. Within a few days, proper furniture arrived. That was difficult times too, because it was 3rd of July when we arrived, and so it was a holiday. Representatives from the district guided us through the teacher certification process, and we felt well informed, supported, And perhaps the most important of all, we felt respected throughout the process. The recruitment agency still charged us high fees, about $10,000 each, but there were no hidden and accruing costs. I knew upfront what I was responsible financially. I have now been working as a science teacher in the Baltimore City school system for about 7 years now. I'm happy to report that this year, I, along with 4 other Filipino teachers, were nominated Baltimore City Teacher of the Year. And recently, I was awarded the Metro Baltimore Alliance for Black School Educators Teacher of the Year Award. So we can be effective, again, with proper support. And many of us have been very, very effective. I am currently teaching at Hamilton Elementary and Middle School. I would like to continue teaching there for many years to come, but at this moment, that possibility is highly uncertain. The district has sponsored their international teachers' applications for permanent residency, but the U.S. Department of Labor has denied the certification of our jobs as not meeting the labor market test, meaning they think that the school district could and should find American teachers to fill our positions. The district appealed the denials, and we are now all awaiting a decision. At any moment, we may get the news that we may stay teaching, or we may get the news that we have as few as 10 days to leave the country. I tell the story all the time, and Marietta has heard this before, that our basement is full of boxes of our mementos and our children's pictures, just in case we were told 10 days to leave. So a short time ago, my wife, my children, and I went to the anniversary of the attack on Fort McHenry. You're very familiar with this. This is the momentous battle that inspired Francis Scott Key to write the poem that became the national anthem of the United States. When the national anthem was played, both my American children put their hands over their hearts. They looked at my wife and they looked at me, and they asked why we were not doing the same thing. So I told them that we could not, as we were not yet American citizens, but that one day we hope to join them in that pledge. Every day, like American and international teachers alike, I guide my middle school students to stand and pledge proudly to the flag. I am their teacher. After so many years of teaching in this country, of dedicated service to the public schools, I hope one day that all international teachers who choose to may be able to join in proudly reciting the pledge as well. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Well, I'm going to take a minute there to try and compose myself. Thank you, Raji, for a very well-delivered story. Erica Lomax has arrived and joined us, yes? And Erica, I'm going to ask you, without any further ado, to come and take the podium for us. And better her than me to follow that.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I do want to apologize. I've previously worked in D.C. probably about 2 years now, and I've obviously forgotten what rain and traffic and travel in D.C. is like. But I relearned today, so I do offer my apologies for being late. I am happy to be here on behalf of the Baltimore City Public School District to offer our support to the International Ethical Teacher Recruitment Code. Students are central to our goals in Baltimore City Public Schools. And in order to ensure that students have access to the best education, we must also make sure that their teachers are treated with dignity and respect. And that's so they can translate these traits to their students through quality teacher performance and care. This is why we honor the Code of Ethical International Recruitment and Employment of Teachers. By looking to the code for guidance, we are continuing to take positive steps to ensure the rights and dignity of every teacher in a district, while also ensuring student achievement in a dynamic world. We also know that given globalization and technological advances, our district will need teachers who can deliver lessons relevant to the global market so that our students can achieve and compete years beyond their time with Baltimore City Public Schools. We know that at these times, ensuring a relevant education may involve international recruitment, and we are further committed to the ethical treatment of those teachers who choose to serve our district. Currently, many of our international teachers teach science, foreign language, math, and special education courses. And as the new Director of Talent Management in the Office of Human Resources, I can tell you that we are starving for those teachers. It's not just our district or because we're in a city, it's because that's a national teacher shortage that we're experiencing. So we know we have to do a better job with the Department of Labor to prove that this is a problem for us in finding teachers who can teach these specialties. These teachers are a necessary and welcome part of our city schools team. Some specialize in teaching blind or deaf students. Some specialize in teaching students with emotional trauma. Others specialize in chemistry and geometry. They fill a role where there is significant national shortage of available teachers. Our cohort of 300 international teachers from countries such as the Philippines, Jamaica, Panama, and India are instrumental to student life in Baltimore. They not only bring a high level of content knowledge to our district, they also bring cultural knowledge and experiences from their native countries that they share with students, knowledge that further enriches our students' exposure to the global community. It must then follow that we invest in their rights and make sure that they are treated ethically throughout the recruitment, immigration, and employment process. One such teacher that has shown our district, other than Mr. Legaspi here, there are several, but one I'd like to talk about today, about how our students can benefit from international recruitment, is Mr. Luces. Mr. Luces teaches at the Bear School, a special place for special children. The principal of the Bear School has highlighted Mr. Luces' ability to work with students with severe and multiple disabilities. He works with students who have vision impairment. He is constantly and consistently supporting critical thinking and accessibility in his classroom, figuring out ways how he can bring education and growth to his students. Mr. Luces will often stay beyond conventional working hours, as many of our teachers do, to help his students with reading and writing Braille, with math, and on other subjects and lessons. He's also certified to teach over several subject areas. He's certified in biology and adult special education. International teachers like Mr. Luces are necessary to the well-being of all our students in our district, and we are honored to have another source of support for teachers such as him and many others who've been invaluable to our students. This code is important for the district because often an immigrant teacher's position and status involves a pathway to residency that can take years or decades and involves many legal intricacies. In addition to guidance from our in-house legal team and our contracted immigration counsel, the district will also look to the code for navigating these legal intricacies. The district is committed to honoring all federal, state, and local guidelines of proper international teacher recruitment practices. Looking forward, we've had many schools in our district ask for more foreign language courses. We believe that in the future, the International Teacher Recruitment Code will assist the district in effectively and ethically recruiting teachers to share Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, and other languages that prepares students for key positions in a world in which they will need to be able to successfully engage. We look forward to continuing to advocate and support our current international teacher cohort and hope there will be opportunities in the future to expand our international teacher workforce. Thank you.
If we could, actually, I'd just ask for one more round of applause for all the panelists, please. And then I believe, and I'm going to check with Mokul, that we have a few minutes for questions. Okay, good. You'll let me know when we run out. So if anyone has questions for our panelists, please. Yes.
Thank you. My name is John Malagrida from the Inquirer. I just want to clarify your remark about the high recruitment of overseas teachers to high poverty areas. There's a disparity in terms of where they are recruited and where they teach. I understand they have special skills, but is it because